Hey, what's up, Street Talks? This is Eric from the Eric Street Photography blog. So today's presentation is on deep depth. So I see a lot of photographers shooting wide open at f1.4, f2, and a lot of photographers are obsessed with bokeh, which is shooting your subject and just blurring out the background. And while this makes very, very lovely photos, of course I do it when I'm photographing my nice cappuccino by the window or something like that. But I think if you want to make more personally meaningful images with more emotional depth, with more depth of soul, I think as a composition technique, deep depth is what we should be going for. So the concept of deep depth is to have something in the foreground, middle ground, and background. And the reason I like these kind of images is that it makes it more interesting for the viewer. So whenever I see photographs with very deep depth, it gives my eyes the opportunity to travel through the frame. And not only that, it's a little bit more visually complex for me, so it's a lot more interesting and it's less boring. And the easiest way you could shoot deep depth is shoot your camera at f8 or f16, anywhere that allows you to have a small aperture, which is a high f-stop, which makes everything in focus. The second thing you want to do is set your camera to either autofocus or manual focus, but the tip is focus on what's furthest away from you. So if you're shooting manual focus, that means pre-focusing to about 5 meters or 20 feet to infinity, and you want the thing in the background to be sharp. And the third thing too is you want to start off by photographing something in the background, but also integrate something into the foreground. So if you're out shooting street photography, just don't photograph that one guy walking by the building in the extreme background. Try to also integrate somebody in the extreme foreground. So as part of this lesson, I'll show you guys some of my personal photos, as well as photos from the masters of film noir, Cartier-Bresson, etc. So this is a photograph that I shot with deep depth. So the story behind the shot is Cindy and my mom are getting ready in Korea. And I think one of the best ways to make better photos is to make more personal photos. So don't think that, oh, I only have to shoot street photography or I have to go out and photograph some kids in Africa. I think the best place to make personally meaningful images is often in your own house. So as of late, all my photos are shot on the Ricoh GR2 point and shoot camera. I shoot high contrast black and white mode on the back of my LCD screen. Shoot in P program mode, which automatically chooses the aperture and shutter speed. I shoot ISO 1600. I just use center point autofocus, and I just set it and forget it. And what this allows me to do is think less about my technical settings and more about my composition and more about the emotions I'm trying to capture through the images. So in this photograph, I'm just working the scene, taking a lot of photos of my mom and Cindy getting ready. I'm purposely using the flash and focusing on myself in the mirror. And what I love about this image is that it has lots of depth, is that you have the arm of my mom on the extreme left and Cindy on the right side of the frame. You have the middle ground of Cindy and my mom getting ready, and you have me in the center. So to break this down for you, I've created this nice little color schematic. So what's red is closest to you in the frame. What's green is in the midground a little bit further away. And blue is what's really far away from the background. So I'll continue to use this schema throughout the presentation. So you could kind of see, once again, the extreme foreground, you have these two subjects of their arms. And I kind of like it how it's extremely white and blown out. To me, it just looks more edgy and more dynamic. Then you have the faces of my beautiful subjects, my mom on the extreme left and Cindy on the far right in the green. And then you have me, the cherry on top. So a lot of photographers are saying, oh, why do you put yourself in your photos? To me, it's like putting your own soul in your photos. Often we're taught early in photography, you shouldn't have your own shadow reflection in the images, but I think it actually makes for the images to be a lot more personal. This is another photograph, and you can see here in terms of depth and layers, you only have 2 layers. So essentially you have the subject's face in the extreme foreground and this eye in the background. So how I essentially made this image was, we saw this guy in the streets of Tokyo, very handsome guy, and I saw this poster of this eye in the background. So I just asked the guy to stand there and not to smile and whatever. And I just made a bunch of images, essentially working the scene to kind of get his eye in the background. And if I'm going to deviate a bit from my keynote presentation and show you guys the contact sheets. So essentially the way that I shot this contact sheet was, I worked the scene and tried to take as many possible photos as I possibly could from different perspectives. So here's the initial image. And you could see all the different variations of the image I had to shoot in order to get the best photo. So you can see shots 1 to 5. I'm trying to focus on the background and getting the man's face in the foreground out of focus. And to me, that's what adds depth to the image. In the other photos, I'm trying to focus on his face and using a flash. So if I just kind of scroll through the images one by one, you can see how I'm taking subtle steps forward to play with the composition. Now I'm putting the focus on the man's face here, using the macro mode, using the flash. Here's without flash. Some photos with flash, some photos without flash. And often when I'm shooting photos, I have no idea what the composition is going to be or the best photo until the very end. So that's why it's important to work the scene and take as many photos as you possibly can. So when you're working on layers, once again, you could do it in different ways. You could have 3 layers, so 1, 2, and 3. Or it's often easier to just start off with 2 layers. So 1 in the extreme foreground, and then 1 in the extreme background. Another famous photo by Cartier-Bresson, one of my favorite images. So you could see in this image you have the man in the foreground and this man in the background. The layers are very simple, but what I also love about the frame is there's a frame in a frame. So if you see the little rectangle on the far right side of the frame with the man in the mustache, and what I think is the cherry on top, or the small detail which makes this a great image, is the man's right eye. His glasses are just reflecting pure white, so it kind of adds more depth and mystery to the frame. And not only that, but you have the subject in the background, which adds another storytelling element to the photograph. So when you're adding deep depth to your photos, you're essentially adding more than one story to your frame, which to me as a viewer makes it more interesting. Scene from Citizen Kane. So one practical tip I have in terms of learning composition is just Google your favorite films like Citizen Kane composition into Google Images, and you'll find lots of great examples. So in this photograph, you can see there's the man on the left side of the frame. Then you have the man in the extreme background. So it makes the photograph much more open-ended. You assume like you're the man on the far left, looking into the man in the background, and it just kind of gives me a sense of hesitancy, of fear, of, it's just the image is much more open-ended, which open-ended images are a lot better because it allows the viewer to make up their own interpretation of the scene. Another classic screen grab from Citizen Kane. So you can see here, one of the practical tips about shooting depth, layers, is try to have 3 subjects. So having one subject in the foreground, extreme foreground, in the midground, and the background. And if you drew an imaginary triangle between these 3 heads, you'll see there's a lovely triangle. And one technique I want to share with you guys is called the Bookend Technique. It's essentially the man's face on the extreme right side of the frame. You don't see any white space around his head. It's taking up the extreme side of the frame. And the reason why I call it a bookend is because it's like bookends on a bookshelf, which kind of push the books into the center of the frame, which gives it much more structure and power. Another classic image from Citizen Kane. Man, Citizen Kane's so good. You could see, so first of all, look at the image and see if you could see the 3 figures in the frame. So look at this image and think, what's in the foreground? You got it? It's him? What's a little bit further away on the right side in the midground? You got it? And the cherry on top, the last smallest figure in the background? Yep, you got it. So don't do layers for layers' sake, or don't do depth for depth's sake. The purpose is to kind of create an open-ended story. Another phenomenal image from Citizen Kane. Once again, so good. If you guys never watched Citizen Kane, just watch it on 8x speed and just look for the cinematography. So you can see here, what's in the extreme foreground? Him. Then the midground, him, and also him in the background. And one practical way you can apply this to your photography is if you're photographing your friends, look for mirrors, other sorts of reflections, and you could kind of create these kind of surrealistic images as well. This, man, when I watched this scene the first time in Citizen Kane, it just blew my mind. So essentially in the movie, I think it's in the beginning of the film, and the family is talking about our buddy Kane in the background, who's a child at the time, and they're having this conversation in the foreground. And all the while this thing is happening, you can see the kid in the background just kind of playing and stuff like that. And let's see, I'm actually kind of curious to rewatch it. So let's go on the YouTubes and search this together. So youtube.com, and I press the tab button as a shortcut. Citizen Kane, window scene. I'm sure this is going to show up. So in this scene, once again, Boyhood, I believe it's this scene. And while this is loading, I'm going to enjoy some more coffee. All right, here we go. All right, beginning of Citizen Kane. All right. So here's Citizen Kane playing as a boy. Watch how the scene is painting back. Okay, watch this as the whole scene is still unfolding and the kid's playing background. Also notice the white space around the silhouette of the boy in the background. And if we just continue to watch this on 2x speed. Okay, so that's essentially the scene. So in terms of the depth, you got these two people in the foreground, this man, and you got our buddy Kane as a child in the background. This is another example of shooting deep depth. So if you want to shoot depth in street photography, one tip is to use a flash. So essentially I just focused on this mysterious man in the far right side of the frame with the hat. Reminded me very film noir. And then in the extreme left side of the frame, I intentionally tried to get this other cool looking guy here with the mysterious glasses on his face and also the glasses in his t-shirt. So what I don't like about this frame is there's a little bit too much mess in the center of the frame. And I shot this on the Ricoh GR2 camera. And one of the benefits of shooting with a wide angle lens, like a 28mm lens, is that you don't have to point the camera directly to your subject. And still, you'll get the subject in the frame. So the man in the far left, even though the flash went off in his face, he had no idea. So you have him in the extreme foreground, and you have the man in the background. And here they're just two layers. All right, next image. Once again, when you're shooting multiple subjects or layers, or you're trying to get more depth in your photographs, go for 3 subjects. 3 is the magical number. I'm not exactly sure why, but I think it's something programmed into our human DNA is when you're telling stories, right? The 3 little pigs, the 3 musketeers. What are some other 3s you could think about in terms of stories? Right, the 3 holy men. Anything in 3s is usually good. So even when a speech technique is, if you're giving a speech, you always want to conclude your thing in 3. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Or I can't think of any other examples, but anyways, when you're shooting layers as well, you want to have some sort of separation and white space behind the subject. So in this photograph I shot here in Tokyo, woman in the foreground, on his phone in the middle ground, and the man in the background. And also right next to him you can see his shadow. And so this concludes our presentation on deep depth. So if you want to learn more about deep depth, go on the Google, search Erikim deep depth. And easier, erikimphotography.com/blog deep depth-depth. So this is the URL, erikimphotography.com/blog/deep depth. Oh yeah, sorry. erikimphotography.com/depth. Erikim depth. I wonder if this shows up. I wonder if Google is. Yeah. Anyways, erikimphotography.com/blog/depth, and you'll have a deeper, more in-depth presentation. And you could also download this free PDF of all the images to access on your smartphone or whenever you want inspiration. Feel free to email this to your friends. So all the images that I showed you as example, you can scroll through this. Or you could just kind of right-click this image, download linked file, I believe. And you could see it's downloading there, whatever. And you could just read the text to find some sort of inspiration and concepts that'll help you. Also, if you want to learn more about composition, go on to Google, search Erikim composition. And please, please, please enjoy all these composition lessons that I write to help improve your photography and your artistic vision. All right, so there's all these articles for you to check out here. Or easier yet, just go to erikimphotography.com/blog/composition, and you will find these nice presentations on composition. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, peace out.